Now Mueller arguably assumed that position because he had the power to make Flynn and all other assorted Trump cronies and flunkies squeal. Rosenstein, of course, perhaps with some satisfaction, understood that he had delivered what could be a mortal blow to the Trump presidency. Bannon, shaking his head in wonder about Trump, commented dryly, "He doesn't necessarily see what's coming." Chapter 17. Abroad and at Home. On May 12th, Roger Ailes was scheduled to return to New York from Palm Beach to meet with Peter Thiel, an early and lonely Trump supporter in Silicon Valley who had become increasingly astonished by Trump's unpredictability. Ailes and Thiel, both worried that Trump could bring Trumpism down, were set to discuss the funding and launch of a new cable news network. Thiel would pay for it, and Ailes would bring O'Reilly, Hannity, himself, and maybe Bannon to it. But 2 days before the meeting, Ailes fell in his bathroom and hit his head. Before slipping into a coma, he told his wife not to reschedule the meeting with Thiel. A week later, Ailes, that singular figure in the march from Nixon's silent majority to Reagan's Democrats to Trump's passionate base, was dead. His funeral in Palm Beach on May 20th was quite a study in the currents of right-wing ambivalence and even mortification. Right-wing professionals remained passionate in their outward defense of Trump, but were rattled, if not abashed, among one another. At the funeral, Rush Limbaugh and Laura Ingraham struggled to parse support for Trumpism even as they distanced themselves from Trump himself. The president had surely become the right-wing's meal ticket. He was the ultimate anti-liberal, an authoritarian who was the living embodiment of resistance to authority. He was the exuberant inverse of everything the right wing found patronizing and gullible and sanctimonious about the left. And yet, obviously, Trump was Trump. Careless, capricious, disloyal, far beyond any sort of control. Nobody knew that as well as the people who knew him best. Ailes' wife, Beth, had militantly invited only Ailes loyalists to the funeral. Anyone who had wavered in her husband's defense since his firing, or had decided that a better future lay with the Murdoch family, was excluded. This put Trump, still enthralled by his new standing with Murdoch, on the other side of the line. Hours and then days, carefully tracked by Beth Ailes, ticked off without a condolence call from the president.
How are you?
The morning of the funeral, Sean Hannity's private plane took off for Palm Beach from Republic Airport in Farmingdale, Long Island. Accompanying Hannity was a small group of current and former Fox employees, all Ailes and Trump partisans. But each felt some open angst or even incredulity about Trump being Trump. First, there was the difficulty of grasping the Comey rationale, and now his failure to give even a nod to his late friend Ailes. "He's an idiot, obviously," said the former Fox correspondent Liz Trotta. Fox anchor Kimberly Guilfoyle spent much of the flight debating Trump's entreaties to have her replace Sean Spicer at the White House. There are a lot of issues, including personal survival. As for Hannity himself, his view of the right-wing world was shifting from Fox-centric to Trump-centric. He did not think much more than a year would pass before he too would be pushed from the network or find it too inhospitable to stay on. And yet, he was pained by Trump's slavish attentions to Murdoch, who had not only ousted Ailes, but whose conservatism was at best utilitarian. "He was for Hillary," said Hannity. Ruminating out loud, Hannity said he would leave the network and go work full-time for Trump, because nothing was more important than that Trump succeed. In spite of himself, Hannity added, laughing. But he was pissed off that Trump hadn't called Beth.
Shut up.
Mueller, he concluded, drawing deeply on an electronic cigarette, had distracted him.
Back off.
Trump may be a Frankenstein creation, but he was the right wing's creation, the first true right-wing original. Hannity could look past the Comey disaster and Jared and the mess in the White House. Still, he hadn't called Beth. What the fuck is wrong with him? Asked Hannity. Trump believed he was one win away from turning everything around, or perhaps more to the point, one win away from good press that would turn everything around. The fact that he had largely squandered his first 100 days, whose victories should have been the currency of the next 100 days, was immaterial. You could be down in the media one day and then the next have a hit that made you a success. Big things. We need big things, he said angrily and often. This isn't big. I need big. Bring me big. Do you even know what big is?
Well, you learn to talk.
Repeal and replace. Infrastructure. True tax reform. The rollout Trump had promised, and then depended on Paul Ryan to deliver, was effectively in tatters. Every senior staff member was now maintaining that they shouldn't have done health care, the precursor to the legislative rollout, in the first place. Whose idea was that anyway? The natural default might be to do smaller things, incremental versions of the program, but Trump showed little interest in the small stuff. He became listless and irritable. So, okay, it would have to be peace in the Middle East. For Trump, as for many showmen or press release entrepreneurs, the enemy of everything is complexity and red tape, and the solution for everything is cutting corners. Bypass or ignore the difficulties. Just move in a straight line to the vision, which, if it's bold enough or grandiose enough, will sell itself. In this formula, there is always a series of middlemen who will promise to help you cut the corners, as well as partners who will be happy to piggyback on your grandiosity. Enter the Crown Prince of the House of Saud, Mohammed bin Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, age 31, aka MBS. The fortuitous circumstance was that the king of Saudi Arabia, MBS's father, was losing it. The consensus in the Saudi royal family about a need to modernize was growing stronger, somewhat. MBS, an inveterate player of video games, was a new sort of personality in the Saudi leadership. He was voluble, open, and expansive, a charmer and an international player, a canny salesman rather than a remote, taciturn grandee. He had seized the economic portfolio and was pursuing a vision, quite a Trumpian vision, to out-Dubai Dubai and diversify the economy. His would be a new, modern, well, a bit more modern, kingdom. Yes, women would soon be allowed to drive, so thank God self-driving cars were coming. Saudi leadership was marked by age, traditionalism, relative anonymity, and careful consensus thinking. The Saudi royal family, on the other hand, whence the leadership class comes, was often marked by excess, flash, and the partaking of the joys of modernity in foreign ports. MBS, a man in a hurry, was trying to bridge the Saudi royal selves. Global liberal leadership had been all but paralyzed by the election of Donald Trump. Indeed, by the very existence of Donald Trump. But it was an inverted universe in the Middle East. The Obama truculence and hyper-rationalization and micromanaging, preceded by the Bush moral militarism and ensuing disruptions, preceded by Clinton deal-making, quid pro quo, and backstabbing, had opened the way for Trump's version of real politics. He had no patience with the our hands are tied ennui of the post-Cold War order, that sense of the chessboard locked in place, of incremental movement being the best-case scenario, the alternative being only war. His was a much simpler view. Who's got the power? Give me his number. And, just as basically, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. If Trump had one fixed point of reference in the Middle East, it was, mostly courtesy of Michael Flynn's tutoring, that Iran was the bad guy. Hence, everybody opposed to Iran was a pretty good guy. After the election, MBS had reached out to Kushner. In the confusion of the Trump transition, nobody with foreign policy stature and an international network had been put in place. Even the new Secretary of State designate, Rex Tillerson, had no real experience in foreign policy. To bewildered foreign secretaries, it seemed logical to see the president-elect's son-in-law as a figure of stability. Whatever happened, he would be there. And for certain regimes, especially the family-centric Saudis, Kushner, the son-in-law, was much more reassuring than a policy person. He wasn't in his job because of his ideas. Of the many Trump gashes in modern major power governing, you could certainly drive a Trojan horse through his lack of foreign policy particulars and relationships. This presented a do-over opportunity for the world in its relationship with the United States. Or it did, if you were willing to speak the new Trump language, whatever that was. There wasn't much of a roadmap here, just pure opportunism, a new transactional openness, or even more, a chance to use the powers of charm and seduction, to which Trump responded as enthusiastically as he did to offers of advantageous new deals. It was Kissinger-esque realpolitik. Kissinger himself, long familiar with Trump by way of the New York social world, and now taking Kushner under his wing, was successfully reinserting himself, helping to organize meetings with the Chinese and the Russians. Most of America's usual partners, and even many antagonists, were unsettled, if not horrified. Still, some saw opportunity. The Russians could see a free pass on the Ukraine and Georgia, as well as a lifting of sanctions, in return for giving up on Iran and Syria. Early in the transition, a high-ranking official in the Turkish government reached out in genuine confusion to a prominent U.S. business figure to inquire whether Turkey would have better leverage by putting pressure on the U.S. military presence in Turkey, or by offering the new president an enviable hotel site on the Bosporus. There was something curiously aligned between the Trump family and MBS. Like the entire Saudi leadership, MBS had, practically speaking, no education. In the past, this had worked to limit the Saudi options. Nobody was equipped to confidently explore new intellectual possibilities. As a consequence, everybody was wary of trying to get them to imagine change. But MBS and Trump were on pretty much equal footing. Knowing little made them oddly comfortable with each other. When MBS offered himself to Kushner as his guy in the Saudi kingdom, that was like meeting someone nice at your first day of boarding school, said Kushner's friend. Casting aside, in very quick order, previously held assumptions, in fact, not really aware of those assumptions, the new Trump thinking about the Middle East became the following. There are basically four players, or at least we can forget everybody else: Israel, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. The first three can be united against the fourth, and Egypt and Saudi Arabia, given what they want with respect to Iran, and anything else that does not interfere with the United States' interests, will pressure the Palestinians to make a deal. Voila! This represented a queasy-making mishmash of thought. Bannon's isolationism, a pox on all your houses and keep us out of it. Flynn's anti-Iranism, of all the world's perfidy and toxicity, there is none like that of the mullahs. And Kushner's Kissingerism, not so much Kissingerism as having no point of view himself, a dutiful attempt to follow the 94-year-old's advice. But the fundamental point was that the last three administrations had gotten the Middle East wrong. It was impossible to overstate how much contempt the Trump people felt for the business-as-usual thinking that had gotten it so wrong. Hence, the new operating principle was simple. Do the opposite of what they, Obama, the Bush neocons too, would do. Their behavior, their conceits, their ideas, education, and class were all suspect. And what's more, you don't really have to know all that much yourself. You just do it differently than it was done before. The old foreign policy was based on the idea of nuance. Facing an infinitely complex multilateral algebra of threats, interests, incentives, deals, and ever-evolving relationships, we strain to reach a balanced future. In practice, the new foreign policy and effective Trump doctrine was to reduce the board to three elements: powers we can work with, powers we cannot work with, and those without enough power whom we can functionally disregard or sacrifice. It was Cold War stuff, and indeed, in the larger Trump view, it was during the Cold War that time and circumstance gave the United States its greatest global advantage. That was when America was great. Kushner was the driver of the Trump doctrine. His test cases were China, Mexico, Canada, and Saudi Arabia. He offered each country the opportunity to make his father-in-law happy. In the first days of the administration, Mexico blew its chance. In transcripts of conversations between Trump and Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto that would later become public, it was vividly clear that Mexico did not understand or was unwilling to play the new game. The Mexican president refused to construct a pretense for paying for the wall, a pretense that might have redounded to his vast advantage, without his having to actually pay for the wall. Not long after, Canada's new Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, a 45-year-old globalist in the style of Clinton and Blair, came to Washington and repeatedly smiled and bit his tongue. And that did the trick. Canada quickly became Trump's new best friend. The Chinese, who Trump had oft-maligned during the campaign, came to Mar-a-Lago for a summit advanced by Kushner and Kissinger. This required some tutoring for Trump, who referred to the Chinese leader as Mr. Xi. The president was told to think of him as a woman and call him she. They were in an agreeable mood, evidently willing to humor Trump, and they quickly figured out that if you flatter him, he flatters you. But it was the Saudis, also often maligned during the campaign, who, with their intuitive understanding of family, ceremony, and ritual and propriety, truly scored. The foreign policy establishment had a long and well-honed relationship with MBS's rival, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Nayef, MBN. Key NSA and State Department figures were alarmed that Kushner's discussions and fast-advancing relationship with MBS would send a dangerous message to MBN, and of course it did. The foreign policy people believed Kushner was being duped by an opportunist whose real views were entirely untested. The Kushner view was either naively that he wasn't being duped, or with the confidence of a 36-year-old assuming the new prerogatives of the man in charge, that he didn't care. Let's embrace anybody who will embrace us. The Kushner-MBS plan that emerged was straightforward in a way that foreign policy usually isn't. If you give us what we want, we'll give you what you want. On MBS's assurance that he would deliver some seriously good news, he was invited to visit the White House in March. The Saudis arrived with a big delegation, but they were received at the White House by only the president's small circle. And the Saudis took particular note that Trump ordered Priebus to jump up and fetch him things during the meeting. The two large men, the older Trump and much younger MBS, both charmers, flatterers, and country club jokers, each in their way, grandly hit it off. It was an aggressive bit of diplomacy.
How do you play?
MBS was using this embrace as part of his own power play in the kingdom. And the Trump White House, ever denying this was the case, let him.
Who are you?
In return, MBS offered a basket of deals and announcements that would coincide with a scheduled presidential visit to Saudi Arabia, Trump's first trip abroad. Trump would get a win. Planned before the Comey firing and Mueller hiring, the trip had State Department professionals alarmed. The itinerary, May 19th to May 27th, was too long for any president, particularly an untested and untutored one.
Why?
Trump himself, full of phobias about travel and unfamiliar locations, had been grumbling about the burdens of the trip. But coming immediately after Comey and Mueller, it was a get-out-of-Dodge godsend.
I don't understand.
There couldn't have been a better time to be making headlines far from Washington. A road trip could transform everything. Almost the entire West Wing, along with the State Department and National Security staff, was on board for the trip. Melania Trump, Ivanka Trump, Jared Kushner, Reince Priebus, Stephen Bannon, Gary Cohn, Dina Powell, Hope Hicks, Sean Spicer, Stephen Miller, Joe Hagan, Rex Tillerson, and Michael Anton.
No, you can't
Also
talk. Can you go away,
was Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the deputy press secretary.
Me a little bit.
Dan
Okay,
Savino,
bye.
the administration's social media director.
Bye.
Keith Schiller, the president's personal security advisor, and Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary.
I don't know, but she sat opposite me and I can see straight up her skirt.
As Bannon put it, Wilbur is Zelig. Every time you turn around, he's in a picture. This trip and the robust American delegation was the antidote and alternate universe to the Mueller report. The president and his son-in-law could barely contain their confidence and enthusiasm. They felt certain that they had set out on the road to peace in the Middle East, and in this, they were much like a number of other administrations that had come before them. Trump was effusive in his praise for Kushner. "Jared's gotten the Arabs totally on our side. Done deal," he assured one of his after-dinner callers before leaving on the trip. "It's going to be beautiful." He believed, said the caller, that this trip could pull it out, like a twist in a bad movie. On the empty roads of Riyadh, the presidential motorcade passed billboards with pictures of Trump and the Saudi king, MBS's 81-year-old father, with the legend, "Together we prevail." In part, the president's enthusiasm seemed to be born out of, or perhaps had caused, a substantial exaggeration of what had actually been agreed to during the negotiations ahead of the trip. In the days before his departure, he was telling people that the Saudis were going to finance an entirely new military presence in the kingdom, supplanting and even replacing the U.S. command headquarters in Qatar. And there would be the biggest breakthrough in Israel-Palestine negotiations ever. It would be the game changer, major like has never been seen. In truth, his version of what would be accomplished was a quantum leap beyond what was actually agreed. But that did not seem to alter his feelings of zeal and delight. The Saudis would immediately buy $110 billion worth of American arms, and a total of $350 billion over 10 years. Hundreds of billions of dollars of investments into the United States and jobs, 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 declared the president. Plus, the Americans and the Saudis would together counter violent extremist messaging, disrupt financing of terrorism, and advance defense cooperation. And they would establish a center in Riyadh to fight extremism. And if this was not exactly peace in the Middle East, the president, according to the Secretary of State, feels like there's a moment in time here. The president's going to talk with Netanyahu about the process going forward. He's going to be talking to President Abbas about what he feels is necessary for the Palestinians to be successful. It was all a Trumpian big deal. Meanwhile, the first family, POTUS, FLOTUS, and Jared and Ivanka, were ferried around in gold golf carts, and the Saudis threw a $75 million party in Trump's honor, with Trump getting to sit on a throne-like chair. The president, while receiving an honor from the Saudi king, appeared in a photograph to have bowed, arousing some right-wing ire. 50 Arab and Muslim nations were summoned by the Saudis to pay the president court. The president called home to tell his friends how natural and easy this was, and how, inexplicably and suspiciously, Obama had messed it all up. There has been a little strain, but there won't be strain with this administration, the president assured Hamad bin Isa al-Khalifa, the king of Bahrain. Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the Egyptian strongman, ably stroked the president and said, "You are a unique personality that is capable of doing the impossible." To Sisi, Trump replied, "Love your shoes. Boy, those shoes. Man." It was, in dramatic ways, a shift in foreign policy attitude and strategy, and its effects were almost immediate. The president, ignoring if not defying foreign policy advice, gave a nod to the Saudis' plan to bully Qatar. Trump's view was that Qatar was providing financial support to terror groups. Pay no attention to a similar Saudi history. Only some members of the Saudi royal family had provided such support when they knew reason. Within weeks of the trip, MBS detaining MBN quite in the dead of night would force him to relinquish the Crown Prince title, which
no, this is my
MBS
first
would then
time
assume
doing
for
this.
himself. Trump would tell friends that he and Jared
so are you still
would be
downloading the
Saudi
destination
too.
then, or no?
We put our man on top.
I didn't even know you
Riyadh,
could
the
download one.
presidential
There's a
party
thing
went
on my
to
screen that
Jerusalem,
says, like,
where the
Sunset
president met
Beach.
with Netanyahu and
Oh, you're not
Bethlehem
here, though?
with Abbas,
Like, you're not, like,
expressing
at the
ever
Sunset
greater
Beach?
certainty that in
No, it
his
just
third-person
got
guise,
stars and stuff
Trump
all around
would
me.
make
Oh,
peace.
okay.
Then to
Yeah,
Rome,
it should be
Pope,
downloading it right now
to
for you.
Brussels, where
Okay,
in
yeah, it says
character, he
70%.
meaningfully
Oh,
drew
yeah,
the
you're
line
almost done.
between Western alliance-based foreign policy,
what are
which
you
had been
doing
firmly
over
in
there?
place since World War II,
Fingers.
and the new America First ethos. In Trump's view,
There you go.
all this
Do you
should have
talk,
been
though?
presidency-shaping
Do you
stuff.
use your words?
He
No?
couldn't believe his dramatic accomplishments
Just the
weren't getting
goggles.
bigger play.
What do you use?
He was simply
yeah,
in
okay.
denial, Bannon, Priebus,
Can't,
and others
okay.
noted, about the
loser?
continuing and competing Comey and
Okay,
I'm a loser?
One of Trump's
thank you.
deficiencies, a constant in the campaign and so far in the presidency, was his uncertain grasp of cause and effect. Until now, whatever problems he might have caused in the past had reliably been supplanted by new events, giving him the confidence that one bad story can always be replaced by a better, more dramatic story. He could always change the conversation. The Saudi trip and his bold campaign to upend the old foreign policy world order should have accomplished exactly that. But the president continued to find himself trapped, incredulously on his part, by Comey and Mueller. Nothing seemed to move on from those two events. After the Saudi leg of the trip, Bannon and Priebus, both exhausted by the trip's intense proximity to the president and his family, peeled off and headed back to Washington. It was now their job to deal with what had become, in the White House staff's absence, the actual, even ultimate, presidency-shaping crisis. What did the people around Trump actually think of Trump? This was not just a reasonable question. It was the question those around Trump most asked themselves. They constantly struggled to figure out what they themselves actually thought and what they thought everybody else was truly thinking. Mostly they kept their answers to themselves. But in the instance of Comey and Mueller, beyond all the usual dodging and weaving and rationalizations, there really wasn't anybody, other than the president's family, who didn't very pointedly blame Trump himself. This was the point at which an emperor's new clothes threshold was crossed. Now you could, out loud, rather freely doubt his judgment, acumen, and most of all, the advice he was getting. "He's not only crazy," declared Tom Barrack to a friend. "He's stupid." But Bannon, along with Priebus, had strongly opposed the Comey firing, while Ivanka and Jared had not only supported it, but insisted on it. This seismic event prompted a new theme from Bannon, repeated by him widely, which was that every piece of advice from the couple was bad advice. Nobody now believed that firing Comey was a good idea. Even the president seemed sheepish. Hence, Bannon saw his new role as saving Trump, and Trump would always need saving. He might be a brilliant actor, but he could not manage his own career. And for Bannon, this new challenge brought a clear benefit. When Trump's fortune sank, Bannon's rose. On the trip to the Middle East, Bannon went to work. He became focused on the figure of Lanny Davis, one of the Clinton impeachment lawyers who, for the better part of 2 years, became a near round-the-clock spokesperson and public defender of the Clinton White House. Bannon judged Comey Mueller to be as threatening to the Trump White House as Monica Lewinsky and Ken Starr were to the Clinton White House, and he saw the model for escaping a mortal fate in the Clinton response. What the Clintons did was to go to the mattress with amazing discipline, he explained. They set up an outside shop, and then Bill and Hillary never mentioned it again. They ground through it. Starr had them dead to rights, and they got through it. Bannon knew exactly what needed to be done. Seal off the West Wing and build a separate legal and communication staff to defend the president. In this construct, the president would occupy a parallel reality, removed from and uninvolved with what would become an obvious partisan blood sport, as it had in the Clinton model. Politics would be relegated to its nasty corner, and Trump would conduct himself as the president
next to me.
and as the commander-in-chief. So we're going to do it, insisted Bannon, with joie de guerre and manic energy, the way they did it. Separate war room, separate lawyers, separate spokespeople. It's keeping that fight over there so we can wage this other fight over here. Everybody gets this. Well, maybe not Trump so much. Not clear, maybe a little. Not what he imagined. Bannon, in great excitement, and Priebus, grateful for an excuse to leave the president's side, rushed back to the West Wing to begin to cordon it off. It did not escape Priebus's notice that Bannon had in mind to create a rear guard of defenders, David Bossie, Corey Lewandowski, and Jason Miller, all of whom would be outside spokespeople.
Hey,
would
so
largely be loyal
this is my
to
second
him.
time using this app,
Most
and
of
I'm
all, it
still a
did not
little
escape
confused.
Priebus that Bannon was
Is all
asking
you
the
do
president
sit
to play
in
a
different
role
looking places and
entirely
talk?
out of character, the cool,
yeah, that's
steady,
what it seems like to me.
long-suffering chief executive.
I haven't done much
And
more.
it certainly didn't help that
I
they were
think this is like
unable
my
to
third
hire a
time.
law firm with a top-notch
She
white-collar
disapproves.
government practice. By the time Bannon and Priebus were back in Washington,
I don't know why she's
3
not talking.
blue-chip firms
She also
said
says
no.
I'm a loser and I
All
need
of
to
them were
put
afraid
water
they
in
would
the
face
bowl.
a rebellion among the younger staff if they represented Trump. Afraid Trump would publicly humiliate them if the going got tough,
You like
and
charades,
afraid
huh?
Trump would stiff them for the bill. In the end, 9
Fucking-
top
It's a
firms
finger thingy. Whatever
turned
she's
them down.
But I'm on the other side now.
Chapter 18. Bannon Redux.
trying to do all the
This
hands.
is her
gestures.
room
Bannon
or
was
yours?
back, according
It's
to the
hers.
Bannon faction. According to Bannon himself, I'm good, I'm back.
Kind of cool.
I said don't do it. You don't fire the director of the FBI. The geniuses around
Too
here
bad I
thought
hate
otherwise.
cold shit.
Was Bannon back?
Yeah, really?
Asked the
Cold?
worried other side of the house. Jared and Ivanka, Dina
Not a
Powell,
fan.
Gary Cohn, Hope
I like
Hicks,
seeing
H.R.
him, I guess.
McMaster. If he was back, that meant he had successfully
just
defied
like
the
seeing,
organizational premise
like-
of the Trump White House.
I live in
That
Georgia,
would
so
always prevail.
we
Steve
we
Bannon
sometimes
had,
get
even
like
in his
ice and
internal
snow,
exile,
but it's rare.
Not stopped his
When I do, I like
to
try to go
verbal
snowboarding.
assault on Jared and Ivanka. Off the record became Bannon's
Skateboarded
effective
before,
on the
but I
record.
like skiing.
These were bitter, sometimes
Snowboarding's fun,
hilarious
like skateboarding
denunciations
and
of the
stuff.
couple's acumen, intelligence, and motives.
But
They think they're defending
haven't
him,
really been
but they
able
are
to do that
always
much
defending
'cause
themselves. Now he
probation.
declared they were finished as a power center, destroyed. And if not, they would destroy the president with their terrible and
I don't have any
self-serving
money.
lies. Even worse than Jared was Ivanka. She was a non-event on the campaign.
Look, she lost
became a
interest
White
in
House
me.
staffer, and that's when people
a
suddenly
fake
realize
nigger.
she's dumb as a brick. A little marketing savvy and has a look, but as far as understanding actually
Hey,
how
here
the
you
world
go.
works and
Look,
what
I can
politics
do
is
stuff
and
too.
what
Check it
means,
out.
nothing. Once you expose that,
Oh,
you
robot.
lose such credibility.
Robot.
Jared
Yep.
just kind of flits in and does the Arab
Wait,
stuff.
did you just admit to
The
being
folks
gay?
on the Javanka side
You just come out the closet? That's what it looked like.
afraid of what might happen if they crossed the Bannon side.
the fuck?
Because the Bannonites, they truly seem to fear,
What's funny?
were assassins.
In 2018,
On
being
the
gay is
flight
fine.
to Riyadh,
Jesus.
Dina Powell approached Bannon.
No,
You just looked like you came out the closet when you did that robot dance.
She told him she
Who,
knew
me?
the leak had come from
Yeah.
Khan, one of Bannon's people and a
Wait,
former writer.
Everyone look at me. Everyone
You
look
should
at
take
me.
it up with her, said an amused Bannon.
Gotcha.
She's a beast, and she will come at you. Let me know how it works out.
Later.
Among Bannon's many regular targets, Howell had become a
Does this
favorite.
retard over
She
here
was
not
often
talk or
billed as
what?
Deputy National Security Advisor.
Which one?
That was her sometime
The
designation
retard going up
in
the
the New York
gang
Times.
signs over there.
Actually, she was Deputy National Security Advisor for strategy.
She's good with her
The
hands.
difference Bannon pointed out between the COO of
Nice.
the chain and the concierge.
Yeah. All
Coming
right.
back from the overseas trip,
Chill out, chill out,
began
chill
to
out.
talk in earnest to friends
TV
about her timetable
Y7.
to get out of the White House and back into a private sector job. Sheryl Sandberg, she said, was her model.
This isn't funny, man.
Oh,
I'm sick of
fucking
this.
God.
You said you were gonna hold my hand, and you're not holding my hand.
On
This
May
is,
26th,
this is a moment.
the day before
You're
the
not even holding my
presidential
hand.
party returned from the overseas trip, the Washington Post reported that during the transition, Kushner,
Well, she don't talk,
but
she seems to know what
the
she's
Russian
doing.
ambassador, had,
Yeah, clearly, man.
at Kushner's
I might have to,
instigation, discussed the possibility
go
of having the Russians
talk to some,
set up a private communications channel between
gay
the
friends.
transition team and the Kremlin. The Post
Better than
cited
us?
U.S. officials briefed on intelligence reports. The Javanka side believed that Bannon
think you're
was
better
the
than me?
source.
Is that what you're trying
Part
to get
of
at?
the by now deep
Yeah, you're not
enmity
gay enough for
between
him.
the first family couple and their allies
Clearly,
and
man.
Bannon and his team was the Javanka conviction that
I need to
Bannon
join
had
this
played a
retard.
part
Hold
in
on.
many of the
Join,
reports of
yes.
Kushner's interactions with the Russians. This was not in other
All right, the
words,
last
an
time I was in
internal
this room with
policy
people,
board.
porn
It was a
came on that
death
TV
match.
screen.
For Bannon to live,
real?
Kushner would have to be
Yeah,
fully
that's sick.
discredited,
That's
pilloried,
awesome, bro.
investigated, possibly
That's
even
fucking
jailed.
funny.
Bannon,
I mean,
assured by
whoever I
his
was in there with
that
had
there was
anim,
no winning against the
hentai, like
Trump family,
cartoon porn on his
hardly
phone.
tried to hide his satisfied
started
belief
showing up
that he was
there.
going to outplay them.
Wait,
In the
is it a
Oval
guy
Office,
or a
in
girl?
front of her father,
It was a guy.
Bannon openly attacked her.
No,
You,
she's a
he said,
chubby
pointing
redhead?
at her as the president watched,
This girl?
are a fucking
He
liar.
said it, not me.
Ivanka's bitter complaints to her father, which in the past
Hold on,
had
hold on.
diminished Bannon,
Look.
were now met by a hands-off Trump. I told you this is a tough town, baby.
360.
But if Bannon was back, it was far from clear what being
Gonna show it
back
here, huh?
meant. Trump being
Yeah, this
Trump,
girl right here, she's a
was
fat
this
redhead.
true rehabilitation?
Yeah, this girl right here, she's a
Was
fat
this
redhead.
true rehabilitation? Or did he feel an even deeper rancor
She
toward
is.
Bannon for having survived
She's
his
Does
She's
the
gonna
carpet
potentially
match the curtains?
Nobody really
Yeah,
thought Trump forgot.
doesn't it?
Instead, he dwelled and ruminated and chewed. One of the
You got a
worst
hardwood
things
floor
is when
down
he
there?
believes you've succeeded at his expense, explained Sam Nunberg,
No.
once on the inside of the Trump circle, then cast
Hello.
to the outside. If
Are you
your win
Asian?
is in
Thank you for
any way
calling
perceived as his
AT&T.
loss,
Currently,
Sure.
our customer service
for
department
his part,
is out of
Bannon believed he
operation.
was back
A
because,
message
at a
after the
pivotal
beep.
moment, his advice had proved
I got
vastly
an idea.
better than that of the geniuses. Firing Comey, the solve
How about we all get on
problem,
probation
was
together?
Ivanka's solution.
We do what?
Indeed, unleashed a
We
set
all
of
should get on
terrible
probation together.
consequences.
You do have boobs.
The Jervanka side believed that Bannon was in essence
I
blackmailing
had the
the
same
president.
problem making my
As
character.
Bannon went
Look,
so
you
went
just gotta
the
make your
virulence
tits
of
as small as
right-wing
possible
digital
and
media.
give yourself a beard. That's
Despite
the only
his
way out
apparent
of it.
obsession with the fake news put out by the New York Times, the
Yeah, I know,
Washington
right?
Post, and CNN.
That's what I said.
For the president, the
Yep.
threat of fake news was actually greater
Yeah,
on
I was
the right.
frustrated trying
Though
to
he
figure
would
that
never
out. Like,
call out
damn
fake
it,
news
every
on Fox,
person has
Breitbart,
tits.
and the others, these outlets, which could conceivably spew a catch-all of conspiracies in which
I mean,
Trump
did your
sold
character
out to a
start out as a
powerful
chick?
establishment, were potentially far more dangerous than their counterparts
I
on the
think
left.
so. I'm not sure.
Bannon,
Like
too,
four
was
characters,
seen to be
I
think he's got
rectifying an
little tits on
earlier
it.
bureaucratic mistake,
They're in there.
where initially he had
it
been
looks like
content to be the brains of the operation, confident that he was vastly smarter than
Bro,
everybody
that's
else,
her.
and
You're
indeed
the-
he tried to challenge
Hey,
him
if
to
you're
that
the one in the
title
blue
and
shirt
not
or
staff
whatever
up.
that thing is,
Now,
shake your
he
head.
was putting his organization and loyalists
Yes?
firmly in place. His off-balance chief
No.
communications
Oh,
staff,
how old are you?
This
Bossy,
picture's familiar. I think I saw this
Jason
last time I
Miller,
was in
Sam
here.
Nunberg, even though he had long fallen out with Trump himself, and Alexandra Preet,
Yeah.
formed quite a private army of leakers and defenders. What's more, whatever
wanna
briefs there
fucking-
had
how
been
do I
between
put pictures
Bannon
up there?
and Priebus came
You
smoothly
can't.
together
It's
over
only
their
she
mutual
can.
loathing of Jared
She's the
and
host.
Ivanka.
Make me the host, woman.
The professional White House was united against
I'm gonna
the
show you
Hey,
the
look.
picture every time I got
family
arrested.
White House.
We have
Adding to
Coco.
Bannon's new bureaucratic advantage, he had maximum influence on the
Make me
staffing
the
of
host.
the new firewall team, the lawyers and comm staff who would collectively become the Lanny Davis of the Trump defense. Unable to hire
This
prestige
app kinda
talent,
sucks. You
Bannon
can't do
turned
anything.
to one of the president's longtime hitman lawyers, Mark Kasowitz.
Okay, so what you gotta do?
Bannon had previously
Okay,
bonded
now I
with
am the
Kasowitz
host.
when the
Let's
attorney had handled a series
Oh,
of
how'd you do
years
that?
of problems on the campaign, including dealing with a vast list
Want to
of
find out
various
how do I-
allegations and legal
Okay, so
threats from an
into
ever-growing
display
list of
my
women
photos,
accusing Trump
my
of
phone.
molesting and harassing them. On May 31st,
How
the
do I
Bannon
select one from my
firewall
phone?
plan went into effect. Henceforth, all discussion related to Russia, the Mueller and congressional investigations, and other personal legal issues would be entirely
Woman,
handled
why
by
don't
the
you
Kasowitz
talk?
team. The president, as Bannon described the plan in private and as he urged his boss, would no longer be addressing any of these areas. Among the many,
I heard
many
stuff.
efforts
She
to
can't- she's
force
trying.
Trump into presidential mode, this was the latest. Bannon then installed
Make
Mark
words.
Corallo, a
Does your
former
mic
Paul
not
Rove
work?
communication staffer, as the firewall spokesperson.
You just are
He was
too
also
shy.
planning to put in Bossy and Lewandowski as part of the crisis management team. And at Bannon's prompting, Kasowitz attempted to further
Say
insulate the
something.
president by giving his client a central piece of advice. Send the kids home.
Trying to find the goddamn
Bannon was
How the hell do I-
indeed back.
expert.
How can you be shy on the internet?
It was his wall around the president. One that he hoped would keep Jervanka out.
Image library.
Bannon's formal moment of being back
Do
was marked by
I?
a major milestone. On June 1st, after a long and bitter internal debate, the president announced
upload
that
a
he had
picture
decided
of
to
me. I need to
withdraw
know how to do
from the
this one.
Paris Climate
Hey, you know what's
Agreement.
funny?
For Bannon, this
We
was a
could be doing this in
deeply
real life,
satisfying slap
but
in the
we
face
don't.
Of liberal rectitude. Elon
right.
Musk and Bob Iger immediately
I brought
resigned from Trump's
It's
business
much
deals
funner to
in
just sit in your room
of Trump's true
with the
Bannonite
thing on your
instinct.
face
It was
and
likewise
pretend like you're
the
in
move that
public.
Ivanka Trump had campaigned hardest against in the
I
White
mean,
House.
it's nice to float around in the
Score,
church, I guess.
said
That's-
Bannon.
Can't do that.
Yeah, that's different.
Oh, redhead girl. Do you
There
have
were
to
a few
connect to
modern
Facebook in order to
political
display only
variables more
Facebook pictures?
disruptive than a dedicated prosecutor. It's the ultimate
I
wild
think you have to
card.
connect to Facebook. Shake
A
your head up and down
prosecutor
if you do.
means that the issue under investigation, or
Are you connected to Facebook on
invariably
here?
cascading issues, will be a
No.
constant media focus.
So
Setting
when
their
you
own public
do you have to go to the
stage,
library?
prosecutors are certain leakers. It means
What do you do to
that
display that
everybody
fucking
in a
picture?
widening circle has to hire a lawyer. Of Trump's
go to the library?
true Bannonite instincts. It was,
Shake your head up and down if you went to the
likewise,
library.
the move that Ivanka Trump had campaigned hardest against
Select
in
image?
the White House. Score, said Bannon.
Ah,
The
what the
bitch
fuck?
is
What do you
dead.
mean? I gotta
There
figure
are
this
few
out.
modern
Who's
political
Yadi
variables more
Cruzadi?
disruptive than a dedicated prosecutor. It's the ultimate
like your name.
wild card. A prosecutor means
What is
that
my
the
name?
issue under
Asshat?
investigation, or
Asshat.
invariably cascading
yeah.
issues,
Jeez.
will be a
Yeah.
constant media focus.
That's because
Setting
my
their own
initials are
public stage,
AZ.
Prosecutors are certain leakers.
It's creative.
It means that everybody in a widening circle has to hire a
Oh,
lawyer.
I accidentally kicked
Even
him. Fuck.
tangential involvement can
Invite him.
cost 6 figures. Central involvement quickly
I was
rises
trying
into
to
the millions.
make him host.
By early summer, there was already an intense seller's market in Washington for top
If it was the same
criminal
guy.
legal talent.
Invite all
As
the
the Mueller
accepted someone.
investigation got underway,
That guy
White
was
House
cool, man.
staffers made a panicky rush to get
Is he
the
back
best
now?
firm before someone else got there first and created
What's up,
a
bro?
conflict. Can't talk about Russia. Nothing. Can't go there, said Katie
Got
Walsh,
3 seconds
now
to say
3
what's
months
up.
removed from the White House on advice of her new counsel. Any interviews
Yeah,
or
you're a guy.
depositions given to investigators risked putting you in jeopardy. What's more,
Oh.
every day in the White House
Guy.
brought new dangers. Any random meeting
Fucking
you might
dude,
find
you can't
yourself in
know.
exposed you more. Bannon kept insisting
Don't work
on the
like that.
absolute
That was good?
importance
Was that
this
good of me?
point, and for him, the
I
strategic
know, it's
importance.
fucking creepy.
If you didn't want to find
See if I
yourself
can
getting
invite
wrung
ads.
out in front of Congress, your career and your net
Yeah,
worth
dude,
in
he's
jeopardy,
chill.
be careful who you spoke to.
Oh shit.
More to the point, you must not, under any circumstances, speak to Jared and Ivanka, who were now
Who got her
Russia
picture up there?
toxic. It was Bannon's widely advertised virtue and
How in
advantage.
the hell did she
I've never
fucking
been to
picture-
Russia. I don't
Like,
know
how do
anybody
people
from
do that?
Russia. I've never spoken to
I mean,
any
who is-
Russians, and I'd just as well not speak
who
to
this
anyone who has.
We're in here looking at the good old
Bannon
times.
observed a hapless Pence in a lot
Oh,
of
hey, what's
wrong
up, bro?
meetings, and helped to bring
Damn,
in the
sexy.
Republican operative Nick Ayers as Pence's chief of staff.
Is that how you
and
look
to
like in real life,
get
or what?
Our fallback guy out of the White House and
Like
running
an
around the
cartoon?
world and looking like a vice president. And beyond
Like,
the
same
immediate
hair?
fears and disruption,
Do you wear glasses?
there was the virtually certain outcome that a special prosecutor delegated to find a crime
What are you,
would find
Caucasian?
one. Likely many. Everybody became a potential agent of implicating others.
What are you,
Dominoes would
white or
fall,
what? Maybe
targets
that's
would
fuck.
flip. Paul Manafort, making a good
the
living in
next.
international financial gray areas, his
What do you
risk
need to know?
calculation
It's
based
for,
on the long shot
your
odds
creators of this
under the
game
radar
use
privateer
purposes.
would ever receive close
Yes, we
scrutiny,
need to know.
would now be subjected
I'm not any of those
to
fucking redheads in that
microscopic
picture, by the way,
review.
okay? I didn't
His
mean to.
nemesis, Oleg
That's her on the
Deripaska, still
right.
pursuing
I don't
his
know why
$17
it's not
million
letting me put
claim
pictures up.
against Manafort, and himself looking for favorable treatment from federal authorities who had restricted his travel to the United States,
Let me see if I can find
was said
something
to be
else.
offering U.S. prosecutors fruits of his own deep investigation into Manafort's Russian and Ukrainian business affairs. Tom Barrett,
Oh,
privy to the
shit.
president's stream of consciousness as well as his financial history, was
Someone
suddenly
help me
taking
figure out how to
stock
do
of his
this.
own exposure. Indeed, all the billionaire friends with whom Trump got on the phone and gossiped and rambled were potential witnesses.
How do I put
In the
my
past,
pictures up?
administrations
Fuck
forced to
you.
deal with a special
What
prosecutor
the hell?
appointed to investigate and prosecute matters with which the president might have been involved usually became consumed by the effort to cope.
Jeez.
Their tenure broke into before and after periods,
Wait.
with the after period
Weirdos
hopelessly bogged
I can
down in
block
the
him,
soap
I can't.
opera of G-Man Pursuit.
You can block me,
Now
or
it looked like the after
Oh, no,
period
it's-
would be
I'm
almost
looking
the
at asshat, but
entirety
won't let me
of the
invite him.
Trump administration.
what?
The
Did you
idea
add him?
of formal collusion
Yeah.
and artful conspiracy, as
Why'd
media
she
and
leave?
Democrats more or less breathlessly believed
Kick
or
me out.
hoped,
And that's why I'm here.
between Trump
And then
Russia,
that's why you guys are
seemed
there.
unlikely
And now
that
she's here.
everybody in
Yeah, we-
White
She doesn't.
we gotta-
She doesn't
Bannon's
talk,
comment
but
that
she
the
seems
Trump
cool.
campaign was not organized well enough.
She
to
does,
move its own
she
state
does,
organizations became everybody's
what's it
favorite
called,
talking
charades.
point. Not least,
I'm not sure they know if they can talk. Well, she's
but
got a
nobody
vibe. She's
was
got to know she
vouching
can
for the
talk.
side deals and freelance operations and otherwise
I'm trying to
nothing burger
piss in a new
stuff that was
room.
a prosecutor's daily bread.
Okay,
and
I think I did
detritus
something.
of the Trump hangers on. And everybody believed that if the investigation moved into the long chain of Trump financial transactions, it would almost certainly reach the Trump family.
No.
And then there was the president's insistent claim that he could do something. I can fire him, he would say. Indeed,
how do you
it
see
was
someone's
another of his repetitive loops. I can fire him.
How do you see someone's what?
Fire him. Mueller. The idea of a showdown.
How do you see people's
stronger,
names?
More determined, more intransigent, more damn the consequences man prevails, was central to Trump's.
It's
own
like when we're in
personal
here, I
problem.
can't
He lived
I
in
can't
a
know
mono
who people are.
One in which, if your own respectability and sense of personal dignity were not a paramount issue,
Random match
if you were
disabled.
weak
That's
in
not
the
it.
sense of needing to seem like a
I can't remember your name,
respected
girl,
person,
because it's not a
you
name.
had a terrific
It's some kind of
advantage. And if
thing,
you made it
like
personal, if you believed
internet
when
name
the fight
thing.
really mattered that it was kill or be killed, you were unlikely to
Whoa,
meet someone
what the
willing to
fuck?
make it as personal as you were. This was Bannon's fundamental insight about Trump.
Oh, that's probably healthier
He
for
made
me.
everything personal.
What,
Try using it
what's
without
that?
the
And he was
headset.
helpless.
Oh, I'm trying to use it without the headset because that was.
Dissuaded by everyone from focusing his anger on Mueller,
Okay.
at least for now, the
Okay.
president focused
I don't
on
seem to
Sessions.
have very many places.
Sessions, Beauregard, was a close Bannon ally, and in May and June,
Yeah, this is-
the
I don't
president's
think
almost
you're in
daily
control.
digs against the attorney general.
If you
No,
can't
I
change
am.
our.
Loyalty and resolve, Trump issued
I
scathing
think I
criticism.
am. I
of
just
his
don't have
stature,
options. Like I haven't
voice, and dress,
downloaded any.
provided a sudden bit of good news for
Even
the
still,
anti-Trump
I
side
like
of the House.
a minute ago.
I got
I was
a
left
text
alone in the
message.
room.
Couldn't really be on top if his key proxy was now being blamed for
I got
everything
a hang
bad
on. I
in
got a
Trump's
text
life.
message.
As always, Trump's
From the
regard
silent
or
one.
scorn was infectious. If you were in favor, then whatever and
Oh,
whomever he
destinations. Here we
associated
go.
with you was also
Oh, okay.
evil.
I got it figured out
If you
now.
weren't,
All right.
then everything associated with you was poisonous.
All right. This is what's
The
up.
brutality of Trump's dissatisfaction kept increasing. A small man with a
I was
Mr.
doing it
Magoo
wrong.
stature and an old-fashioned
We are
Southern
not in
accent.
space.
Sessions was bitterly mocked.
We
by
were
the
about
president,
to be.
who drew a corrosive portrait of physical.
But then I
and
saw
mental
the
weakness.
airplane, and I like
Insult
airplanes.
trauma radiated
Yeah,
out
I
of
can't
the
blame
Oval
you.
Office. You could hear it when passing by.
I fly airplanes,
Bannon's efforts
actually.
to talk the president down,
Really?
reminding
Like
Trump of the
Cessnas or
difficulties
like
they would encounter during
four
another
engine?
attorney general
I
confirmation.
started in
The
Cessnas.
importance of Sessions to
I
the
just got my
hard
commercial
conservative base,
airplane single
the
engine
loyalty that
license
Sessions
in
had shown
October.
during the Trump campaign.
Oh, congratulations.
To the
Thanks.
anti-Bannon
Yeah.
side's
So are you-
satisfaction.
Are you
it
flying
resulted
commercially
in
yet,
another
or?
round of Trump's
Um,
Bannon. The attack
Commercially,
on
as
Sessions now
in
became, at
for
least
a
in
living,
Trump's mind,
almost.
Well, I mean, like,
salvo in an active
commercially
effort
could
to
be like,
replace
you know,
Sessions
taking
as Attorney
parachute
General.
up.
But there were
Or-
only
Right,
two
exactly.
candidates to
Um,
run the Justice
I'm currently
Department, from whom Trump
working on
believed
becoming a
he could
flight
extract
instructor.
absolute loyalty. Chris Christie
Oh, that's
So
and
then,
Giuliani. He believed they would both